So I'm on the MPC Live 3 here, and as someone who came from Ableton and then from the Akai Force, one of the things that I've struggled to work out is the relationship between clips in the clip matrix and sequences and the arranger. Because some people work in the MPC environment and have been used to working with sequences all of the time, and so for them, the clip matrix is new and the arranger is new. And some people work in a clip matrix, and for them, the sequences can be a little bit hard to figure out. So if you're unsure what I'm talking about, I'm here in the main mode on MPC 3.0 or 3 point whatever the most recent update is. So this is what the main mode looks like. So I'm on a audio track, and you can see that I have on the top, it has sequence 2. So if you're not sure what a sequence is, the idea behind sequences is in the old MPC workflow, which is still works on current MPCs, some people build their songs in sequences of bars, and then the idea is you would switch between those sequences, and when you wanted to create a full song, you would go into song mode, and song mode is essentially you just saying play sequence 1, then sequence 2, then sequence 1 again, and sequence 4, and you would build up your song that way, and at the end you could export your entire song as a sequence, and then you could do your vocal track over it, and that would be your song. So that makes sense, but it's a little bit different to the workflow of, for example, the clip matrix. If I go here, so if you're used to working in the clip matrix, it's a little bit different. How you would do it is you would have your different tracks along the top going from left to right, and you would have different rows that you could put different audio clips or MIDI clips or drum tracks or whatever it might be into those different rows. So the top row, for example, here where my finger is, you might have some drums here, then you might have a bass here and some keys and so on. And then you might decide, okay, well, they go for 16 bars or 8 bars. Underneath, I'll have a different 16 bars or different 8 bars of different drums, different bass, different synths, whatever it might be. And so you would build your song that way. So you'd have the first row might be your intro, second row might be your verse, third row might be your chorus, fourth row might be a bridge, and so on. And you could build your entire song that way. And because you can actually make the rows automatically play in order, you can actually get the MPC to play the entire song one row after the other until the end. Now, both of these modes, the clip matrix and the sequence structure, they both use the arranger, but they use it in different ways. And this is what was confusing me. What was the relationship between the arranger and the sequence mode, which I didn't really use very often? I understood how the arranger works in the clip matrix, because if you go into the arranger, what you can do here is best to turn the loop off actually. So this yellow bar here is the loop. Best to turn it off. And what you do is you press record to the arranger. You see it says recording to arranger, and then you go back to your matrix, and then what you do is you play your rows in order. You can either do it manually or you can automate the process, and then your arrangement will be made up of your entire song, but in a linear sequence from left to right. And then you can sing your entire vocal line, or you can play your guitars over the whole song, or whatever you want to do. So that made sense to me because I used to work in Ableton, then I had an Akai Force, and so that workflow made sense. But what I didn't understand was, how does a sequence relate to the arranger, or how does a sequence relate to the clip matrix? And I think I've figured it out, and it might be useful for people who are just trying to figure out what's going on with this. And it's because both of these methods can be used, but they don't necessarily interact with each other in the way that you would think. So let's go back to main mode. Let's say you're someone instead who works in this screen primarily, and you're working in sequences. So here, what you're doing is you're probably recording to this screen here. You've got your MIDI notes here, and then you might go on to a different track, and you might start recording on that other track, and you're sort of building up your song that way, using your tracks on the main screen. And then you say, okay, that's my verse done. I'm going to do my chorus. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to switch to a different sequence. And these are all the sequences, and you can see that I'm not using them. And so that's one of the differences. If you use the clip matrix and you're building your song from the clip matrix into the arrangement, you essentially only need one sequence, because the clip matrix stays the same regardless of which sequence you're in. So it doesn't change. So if I'm in this sequence 2, as it's called, and I switch to a new unused sequence, my clip matrix will stay the same. Whatever clips I have in it will stay there. The clip matrix doesn't change between sequences. But what does change is what's in the arranger. So that's one of the differences, because what I figured out, and which is obvious to a lot of people, but it wasn't to me, is that if you're in this main mode, and if you're using a sequence and you're recording something into a sequence, what you're actually doing is recording it into the arranger. So every sequence is essentially this arrangement window. Whatever's in this arrangement window is going to be the sequence. And so when you go from one sequence to another, if I go back to main and I want to switch sequences, using this jog wheel and go to a new sequence, what I actually am doing is, and it should work, this is what I found last time, yes, is the arrangement is blank. So you get a new arrangement window. So that's what you're doing when you're changing from one sequence to the other, is you're actually going into a new blank arrangement window and you're recording into the arrangement every time. So sequence 1 fills up the arrangement window with your first 16 bars, sequence 2 with your second 16 bars, and then when you export to song mode, or when you create the song, which I've never actually done, but I've seen it done in videos, essentially what it's doing is it's taking everything from these arrangement windows and putting it in order, and then that becomes your full song. And that's confusing, I think, or can be confusing if you're trying to figure out whether you can or whether you need to use the sequence function or the sequence process with the clip matrix, because the clip matrix uses the arrangement window in one way and the sequence approach uses the arrangement window in a different way. And so it can be confusing. So I just thought it would be helpful to explain that there isn't really a right way to do things, but it can definitely be confusing if you're trying to figure out where all your clip information goes or where your bars are actually being stored. So hopefully that's helpful for someone.